Chapter 5. And they came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes. And as he was getting out of the boat, immediately from the tombs a man with an unclean spirit went to meet him, who lived among the tombs. And no one was able to bind him any longer, not even with a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles had been shattered. And no one was strong enough to subdue him. And during every night and day among the tombs and on the mountains he was crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and knelt down before him, and crying out with a loud voice he said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, because we are many." And he was imploring him many times that he would not send them out of the region. Now a large herd of pigs was there at the hill feeding, and they implored him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, so that we may enter into them." And he permitted them. And the unclean spirits came out and entered into the pigs, and the herd, about 2,000, rushed headlong down the steep slope into the sea, and were drowned in the sea. And their herdsmen fled and reported it in the town and in the countryside. And they came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the one who had had the legion, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and about the pigs. And they began to urge him to depart from their region. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed began to implore him that he could go with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go to your home, to your people, and tell them all that the Lord has done for you, and that he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and they were all astonished. And after Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered to him, and he was beside the sea. And one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell down at his feet. And he was imploring him many times, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come, lay your hands on her, so that she will get well and will live." And he went with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing around him. And there was a woman who was suffering from hemorrhages 12 years, and she had endured many things under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and had received no help at all, but instead became worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him, and touched his cloak. For she was saying, "If I touch just his clothing, I will be healed." And immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she realized in her body that she was healed of her suffering. And immediately Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from himself, turned around in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothing?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing upon you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" And he was looking around to see the one who had done this. So the woman, frightened and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. But he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace, and be well from your suffering." While he was still speaking, they came from the synagogue ruler's house, saying, "Your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher further?" But Jesus, ignoring what was said, told the ruler of the synagogue, "Do not be afraid, only believe." And he did not allow anyone to follow along with him except Peter and James and John the brother of James. And they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and saw a commotion, and people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he entered, he said to them, "Why are you agitated and weeping? The child is not dead, but is sleeping." And they began laughing at him. But he sent them all out, and took along the father and mother of the child, and those who were with him, and went in to where the child was. And taking hold of the child's hand, he said to her, "Talitha cum," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And immediately the girl stood up and began walking around, for she was 12 years old. and immediately they were utterly and completely astonished. And he commanded them strictly that no one should learn of this, and said to give her something to eat.